Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Castovers. My name is Christian Corley. His name is James McLean. And there's quite a bit to talk about this week in terms of new things going on. We are aware that we have discussed previously doing a commentary on a classic serial, and we're still going to be doing that. And how that appears to you will depend on whether you're on Patreon or whether you get your podcast through Apple Podcasts or Spotify, the old-fashioned way. We'll come to that a little bit later on. The thing that I want to talk about, first of all, before we move on to Robots of Death, is the TV movie, which is incredibly 30 years old this year, James.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
all things, it ages.
like all things, even the TV movie ages.
Even the TV, who would have thought back in the day where it was so current that it would age?
Yeah, yeah, it's one of those things that you never really
I know.
take into
At one
account.
point, it was of the moment. It was coming up, and then it's coming up, and now it's old. Who would
Yeah,
have thought?
yeah. And I don't know about you. I was very enthused by it. I thought it was exciting. It wasn't perfect. There were things about it that I wasn't keen on at the time, but in the grand scheme of things, they're very, very minor things, really. But the main thing about it is that it seemed to give Doctor Who a shot in the arm, and it certainly helped. It certainly helped BBC, well, Virgin, and then BBC Books. BBC Books took the license back from Virgin, after all, and there was a comic strip in Doctor Who magazine. Obviously, there was the comic strip by Lee Sullivan in Radio
Mm.
Times and I mean it kind of led into Big Finish, and in some ways it kind of led into 2005. So it was significant, even though it didn't have the immediate impact that it wanted to have.
Yeah, it was a proof of concept for a concept already proved that did actually, in a serious way, was, as you say, probably needed because in the 90s there was a sense when Doctor Who ended there was a sense that science fiction's viability for a market was kind of dampening. I mean,
Mm,
obviously the 80s had been big for science fiction on the riding on the back of Star Wars, so that had given it its up. But I think the 80s had also struggled to find what science fiction was. I can't think of much science fiction in the 80s which had that mainstream hit that Star Wars had. And I
yeah,
think that was part of the problem.
yeah.
And when Doctor Who was kind of falling apart, yeah, in the States, Star Trek Next Generation was starting to give the genre a new sense of life, but it was a sense that was kind of sitting around drama, almost
Well,
melodrama
the other
as
thing
much
about
as,
that is that was 1987, I think,
yeah.
and I mean most people would say it didn't really get into its stride until the third series anyway, and that's
Well, yeah,
1990.
absolutely over here, we didn't get it for a couple of years anyway, so we
Yeah,
didn't get it in 87. So for BBC, for British markets, there wasn't much. So Doctor Who, not only did it start to look cheap, I think as people would say, it didn't quite know who its audience was. Was it for kids or was it for adults? You watch Survival, it's very hard to tell of that episode who it's really aimed at. So yeah, I think you're right. I think by 96, the Virgin for the fans, the Virgin novels, the New Adventures had shown that the show could grow up. And some people balked at that and didn't like that, but it showed it had potential to be more than it was. But you're right. I think the movie gave a sense that that it could fit with this sort of enlightened interest in sci-fi, which had come through the X-Files. I'm thinking that's probably its closest link, and being Vancouver based as well, where most of these 90s sci-fi shows are being filmed anyway. It sort of it fit the model that the
yeah.
90s was providing. So yeah, it was definitely of its time, speaking to where the sci-fi was and giving the British people, because it did well over here, even though it didn't do very well for the States. It did well here in terms of ratings. I think it was about 9 million, if I recall. It was well received. It was higher than the show was getting previously.
Yes, it
Did
was.
show that there was a taste for the show, especially, and it could meet the values without being. It wasn't exceptionally high end sci-fi, but it looked comfortable, didn't it? It
It
looked
did.
it looked nice.
I mean, it looked good for 90 minutes, whereas the best Doctor Who could have done previously to that would be look good for a couple of minutes.
A couple of minutes, yeah, and that would be kind. If we're quite fair. I mean, again, you look at Survival. There's not much there, and the way that television was shot in the 80s as well doesn't help too. But by the 90s, there's a slightly different approach to television. We're sort of moving more towards film. So it looks good. I mean, I don't particularly like it. I love the first. I remember watching it and really liking the first 20 minutes. I was with my family and they were quite impressed. And then it just kind of falls into formula,
Mm.
and it loses its where it was going, its character, and it becomes a bit not derivative, but samey. You've got the car chase. You've got the ending is very big battle ending, which doesn't really make any sense either. Uh, and you're really trying to watch it for what little bits of Paul McGann there are. You know, for him to try and establish a doctor, he just doesn't have time to establish. And you're left at the end of the film thinking, but what does this mean? Who is this person that I've seen for like, well, he doesn't come in till about 20 minutes in, 25
Mm.
minutes in, almost like a full episode of Doctor Who in is almost a cliffhanger when he changes in terms of time period, time duration. Like, well, yeah. So you've had what, 70 minutes, 65 minutes to get a sense of who he is? It's not much.
It's not. It's I think as well. Has it does have its problems, and that's one of them. It there's a big kind of there was a lot of fans who wanted Doctor Who to continue as a continuation. So it had to have a clear continuation, which meant having a previous Doctor, and which almost certainly meant having either, and this is how things were at the time, either Tom Baker or Sylvester McCoy. So obviously they took the sensible option and went with Sylvester McCoy. But yeah, he is on screen for a long time. For
Mm.
a,
But it is fascinating, isn't it, when you think how wise they were to go with McCoy when, the 21st century has been built on franchises and continuity. That has been the staple in 2026. Continuity is still the big brand thing. So to have
mm,
gone with Baker and sort of split their continuity would have been for the easy win of
yeah,
popularity would have been a really big mistake. But you're
yeah,
right, and that's obviously what Davis recognised when he came in 2005, that you don't need another Doctor, and it still can be a continuation. It's just how you write it. And I
yeah,
think even McCoy sort of said that as well, that it was the wrong way to do it.
yeah,
And
yeah.
he's right, because they could have then redressed that in a second or third episode.
Yes, exactly. So it's 30 years since the TV movie went out at Easter was it Easter or was it Whit? Or was it's that sort of springtime? I'm going to have to look this up now. Sorry, everyone. I should know the date of this because it's significant news today. Doctor Who TV movie air date UK.
Surely it's round about now, is it, for him
No, it
to
was
have...
May the
Oh,
27th. So
May.
it wasn't
Okay.
Easter, as I was right to question. It was, and it only ran for 89 minutes. So we've been doing a disservice. Um, 27th of May 1996 in the UK is when it went out. It was a bank holiday Monday, if I remember rightly. So there was lots of people gathered on the TV watching it. Now, there was I remember there was some criticism over this being it's bank holiday Monday, so everyone's in. In my experience of a bank holiday Monday on the evening, people go out and then they turn up at work with headaches the next morning. So Doctor Who did a good job pulling in that audience back then in 1996. So it has been released on DVD and Blu-ray previously, but there's a new edition coming along that's been announced this week, and it features two versions, I think, but there's a third version which isn't included. Okay, and I just want to go through these because it had quite a strange kind of editing history. So there's the uncensored UK version, which is the main version used on previous physical media releases. It's uncensored.
But that wasn't it. But at the time, it wasn't uncensored on
We'll get
broadcast,
to
was it?
that.
Okay,
We'll get to
yeah.
that. Yeah. There's the USA broadcast version, which has 6 fades in and out for ad breaks and has a caption that says based on the original series broadcast on the BBC. Those two that I've just described are both on the new 2026 version. The censored UK version is not on this release. This features Chang Lee's gun battle sequence heavily edited to reduce gun usage. The Seventh Doctor on the operating table is edited down. There's no screaming, and the neck snap of Chang Lee is also not included in that. That's the version that's on iPlayer. So that's the version that went out in May 1996. As I recall, there had been a gun-related tragedy in the UK prior to that, which is, I think, that resulted in the gun battle sequence being edited down. Other issues were edited as well. So that version, the one that basically the UK people are the most familiar with, that's not on this new Blu-ray, which is interesting
Yeah,
because you've
because
got the space for it if you wanted to.
well, that's what's odd about it. Because I mean, a lot of Blu-ray purchases, a lot of love for old things, especially for people, potentially especially neurodivergent people, but not only those people, people who love Doctor Who. If they've watched something a lot, there's a rhythm, a
Yeah,
cadence that they're looking for,
yeah.
and when that breaks, it kind of they lose that legacy that they're after. So yeah, I mean, I'm not like that. Well, I am like that, but I'm not like that with this film. I'm actually quite interested to re-see the uncensored one because, in a weird way, because the rhythm that I remember, I don't like because it feels janky at that moment in the censored
Yeah.
version. But yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, I
Okay.
agree with you. I'm surprised it's not on there for that reason.
So a nice little trailer has been released, voiced by Sylvester McCoy, who still hasn't got over his rolling R's, and and it
Interesting.
describes how the original 35mm films have been restored. So they've actually been found that they are known to exist, and they've been made available to the BBC. And it's a 4K UHD edition, which means you need like a more advanced Blu-ray player. So like a 20-year-old Blu-ray player is no good for this. If you've got a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox Series S, I think it is the one that has the Blu-ray drive, then they will work, or you'll need a more modern Blu-ray drive. So as I say, the uncensored UK version and the USA broadcast version, they're on it. There's a soundtrack in Dolby Atmos 5.1 and stereo. There's a featurette of Sylvester McCoy and Janet Fielding. You may not know this. Janet was Paul McGann's agent at the time. Three new featurettes with Daphne Ashbrook, Eric Roberts, and Yi Ji So. Two audio commentaries, isolated music score, production info text, the 7-year Hitch making of documentary, Paul McGann's audition tape, alternate takes, electronic press kit and behind the scenes footage, a TARDIS tour, BBC Trails, and much more, it says. Some of this seems a little bit familiar, but obviously there's new featurettes on there as well. So that's quite interesting too. I have two versions of this on a shiny disc already, and I am kind of edging towards this. The only thing that's holding me off is the fact that I don't have a 4K system to play it on. So I would be left with just basically having a digital only version, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it screams,
30th anniversary tie-in.
yeah, are you 50? Do you remember when DVDs were
Guilty.
hot and features meant something? Anyone under 50 will not be interested and be on YouTube. Yeah, it I don't know. I don't know if I care enough, to be honest. I'm like that a bit these days.
Yeah, I like the cover
It's
art. Have you seen the cover art?
I've not. I mean, to be honest, I flicked through on social media the trailer and
Hmm.
I saw the start of it and I looked at it and I was like, fuck this, and just carried on because I just couldn't be
Oh,
bothered to see.
right.
I don't know. I mean, I know you and Brian have always had a massive love for the film.
Yeah.
Um, and I actually respect it, so I'm not actually trying to devalue that love because I think there's a style to it and there's a vibe to it which is actually quite endearing. But I think I also find it a sort of like a node of frustration because it was a point where the show kind of felt like it was going to come back in a way.
Hmm.
In a really odd way, it was so ahead of its time. If you think of like the Fallout show and how the Fallout show is kind of built on its adherence to the aesthetic values of the game, and here was a Doctor Who film pilot that was being aimed at a different audience, and yet it was really pulling on the strings of aesthetic and narrative continuity in a way, like you said, 90s wasn't really happy doing. It's kind of sad in that sense, and I think that's why so many fans love it. Is that it's still sort of the classic era, sort of, but it looks as they would like it to look
Yeah.
because by
Yeah.
that point they weren't quite 50 yet, they'd be in their 20s, so they would be at a point where they were like, I want to see Doctor Who look good, and it was Doctor Who looked good. There was nothing really bad in that in terms of its look. I mean, I know now we look at it and the CGI snake looks a bit blur, but at the time, it all looked good. It's what fans wanted, and yet it wasn't what the Americas needed, and so it didn't go any further. And in a sense, maybe that was a good thing because you may have
Mm.
not got the BBC retrain its eye back on it, and we don't know what sort of offshoot that could have gone in. And in the 90s, I doubt it would have been a great offshoot. I doubt the stories would have been particularly amazing. It would have been a one season wonder and then vanished. It just had that feeling because I
Mm.
just don't think there was a market for it there in
Well,
America.
based on what we do know about it, it would have been a one season wonder, to use your phrase, which retreaded previous
Well, it
episodes
depends.
of
I
Doctor
mean,
Who.
would it have done that if the pilot, I know that was sort of the ideas before the pilot went out. If the pilot went out, would they have done that, gone down that
I
same
think they probably would have done, yeah.
framework?
I think they
Um,
would have done. They may not have done some of the more significant ones. I think they may have redone things like Keys of Marinus and other longer serials from the
But I mean, if you
60s.
had, which you didn't really have then, it was starting. But if you had this sort of long, this series, this sort of like series long form narrative, which Doctor Who has done far too much since 2005, you could have had so much fun for a new audience with that. I mean, you could have had an episode, episode three, which I suppose does a bit like Nice the Doctor does, and start with Sylvester McCoy and sort of say, "Hello, I'm the Doctor." And for new people into the show, that's a really interesting concept to have. And then to reveal
Mm,
later on that this is the same person, but this person transforms.
yeah, yeah.
For another, there's a lot of fun you could have had with more contemporary writing approaches. So yeah, I think for me it's a bit frustrating because there's only 90 minutes. I kind of feel I've seen every bit of that film far too much that there's just not much else it can give me anymore. So when I saw the trailer come up and it's like 4K and I was just like, I just can't be I've got better things to do like sleep. You know, I'm 50 now. There's two things I'll do is obviously I'll buy DVDs to try and remind me that life is not slowly coming to an end and there was a time where I actually felt fit, vibrant and hopeful for the future, or I could just go and sleep because I'm tired of it all. And I did the latter. But yeah, I'm sure the trailer was great. Maybe I'll watch it now. I'm feeling mildly guilty in a way that no, I'm not feeling guilty at all, but maybe I'm feeling that the part of my job here, maybe I should have watched the trailer. But I didn't know you were going to talk about this today.
Well, you did. I told you about half an hour ago.
Yeah, half an hour ago.
Um,
He makes it sound like he's got it all under control here and he's the professional. He was 30 minutes late. He said half 8.
I would never say half eight.
He did. You said I could find it on my phone.
You said half eight.
Yeah, and you agreed.
No, I definitely did not agree to half eight. Anyway, there's so yeah, so that this is coming out it's available to order from today on all the places where you order things on the interwebs. So there's just one other thing that I want to bring in related to the TV movie, but it's a more modern thing. A gentleman called Pete Matai, who I think we're all familiar with, has shared a photo of himself on Instagram a couple of days ago, wearing either a replica or the original of Paul McGann's coat from the TV movie. Now, the reason this is considered to be significant is that he has recently talked about rumors of, this was at Gallifrey 1, about whether he would be taking over from Russell T Davies.
I see.
He said at Gallifrey 1, it's not for me to say. It's not my decision. I will give you my party line, which is that the position is not vacant. Russell is the showrunner and he's a friend of mine. And whenever he calls, I will come running. But he's the showrunner and I'm fine with that. So that's pretty much it. But he does go on to say, I'm at the stage where I am. I had been creating my own shows for a while, and I kind of want to do that. So I'm not really a writer for hire anymore. I don't go in to do other shows, not because I wouldn't, because I'm too snobbish for it, but purely because there's a limited amount of time I have, and I need to concentrate on my own shows. But one exception to that rule is Doctor Who. When Russell said, I want you back, I said, yes, absolutely, I'll be there. So yeah, Doctor Who is my only exception. And that was related to working on particularly the War Between the Land and the Sea. So I mean, there is this ongoing speculation that he is the person who will take over from Russell T Davies,
Hmm.
and there he is wearing the Paul McGann coat. So he's clearly likes Doctor Who. Um, in terms of where we are with Doctor Who at the moment, we know what's happening up until Christmas Day this year. Presumably, we're going to be finding out things as the year progresses, in terms of what's going to happen after that. But he seems a good choice, doesn't he?
Yeah, I guess so. But each of them always seem a good choice, and yet fans always get
Yeah.
fed up with them because I think they're all to some degree behest to where the market is at the time. But then I suppose I'm one of those people, and a bit like you to some degree. Well, no, perhaps not a bit like you, to be fair, who will kind of watch all the eras and just take them for what they are. So whether it's Russell T Davis or Mackay for the next one, I'll watch either way.
Is there then, I mean, I know we talked about this before, and I don't want to retread old ground too much because we've got something else to do today. But is there not, I mean, he's an interesting one who straddles both not really part of the Doctor Who world, but
Yeah,
is also in the Doctor Who world. And we've talked before about how maybe the show
yeah.
what actually needs is
Mm,
maybe get rid of the idea of showrunner, but
mm.
specifically have someone who isn't from the Doctor Who world overseeing things.
Yeah, I think, yeah, it's a really good point. It would be really nice to have someone has obviously shown that they've got chops to work within that space, but is not that sort of big, massive fan which we've had previously, and just see whether that produces something slightly different. Because I think that's why I get a little not that bothered about the showrunners. Because while I had issues in the Moffat era, there was obviously some issues in the Chibnall era, there was some issues in the Davis era. They all kind of feel the framework is largely the same. They don't really deviate from it, and I think that is, as we've said this 100 times before, you could have a series where the TARDIS doesn't know where it's landing, and it's just, singles and anthology approach which we haven't seen since 2005. You could get rid of the long arc. You could have a companion from someone who's not London or Sheffield. There's ways you could do this, which in 20 years hasn't happened. So if someone came in and did something just slightly different that felt in a slightly different direction, God, even just benched him in unit or did something more like uh, the War Between the Land and the Sea, that would be something different. I felt there was a couple of times in Davis's where he tried, and I think Chibnall initially tried as well, but just couldn't quite find a different winning format. But yeah, you're right. I'd like to see whether someone else other than Davis now would be interesting to see where they take it. Because I think what we found with Davis is that the I think he's a very smart producer, and he put in his smart producer hands. But I think the markets and the way what television is works now is so different. I think it's just proved even his golden touch is probably not quite right either. And I'm not sure
Mm.
what is quite right, but I think it's a lot harder. And yeah, it'd be so interesting to see how someone else tries a different take at it.